Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today is a Q&A episode, and I have 3 questions I want to dive into. But first, before I go into that, I just want to go over a few ways you can help support the podcast. So first, if you found this podcast to be helpful in any way, if you could leave a rating and review, and that will help more people find this podcast. If you think somebody would benefit from this, again, it would by liking and leaving a review. It's going to help more people find this. There with that, again, appreciate everybody who listens. But again, if you could take that time to do that would be great and greatly appreciated on my end. Next, I have my free masterclass on body recomp, what it is, how to do it. The link to that is in the show notes. I also have my free masterclass on nutrition periodization. I go over each nutrition phase, how to do it, common mistakes, how to make adjustments, literally dive into each one there with that. So if you're interested in that, again, the link to that is in the show notes. And then lastly, if you haven't yet, give me a follow on Instagram, Jeff, and that's where I'm most active on social media. And if you have any questions or anything I say on here doesn't make sense or any feedback on the podcast in general, again, always just shoot me a message there and I'm more than happy to go over any of those things with you. So with that out of the way, let's dive into today's topics or questions actually. So the first question is calorie recommendations for recovering from an injury. This is a good question, right? A lot of times, let's say you have a goal of fat loss and you get injured. What do you do, right? Let's say you have a goal of building muscle and you're in a surplus. What do you do? And so I think in most cases, I would push clients towards maintenance calories in this situation. Okay. But really at the end of the day, I would stay out of a deficit during this period of time. This isn't a time to drop body fat. If you're in the middle of a fat loss phase and this happens, you probably want to get your calories back to maintenance. Biggest reason is if we're in an energy deficit, that means there's an energy deficit, right? We're not getting as much energy as we need to really, I guess, thrive would be the right word, or to just run as optimally as possible. Again, if you have if you have a lot of body fat, again, at some point you're going to have to drop body fat, but this would not be a time that I would be actively trying to get into an energy deficit. I would say your maintenance. I would at least, again, I would push you to stay out of a deficit in general, but for sure a large deficit. Okay. Maybe somebody who has a decent amount of body fat. If you're in a small calorie deficit, you're like seeing your weight turn down slowly. Again, is that going to be probably the most optimal? Probably not. But at this point, I would have somebody go to their maintenance calories. Now, hopefully when this happens, you've already figured this out. If not, this is a time to at least take some time to figure out an idea of where your maintenance calories are at here with that. Other things that I would do too, at the end of the day, your calorie amount is going to impact it, but it's not really the big thing, right? Obviously listening to your doctor, orthopedic, whoever it is in terms of what they say you should do, but other things again are going to be staying hydrated, getting good sleep, taking any supplements you need to. And then from a workout perspective, again, listening to the doctor, orthopedic, and whatever they say goes from that perspective and do what they say there with that. But again, hydration is going to be key. That's going to help you recover. Obviously, getting good sleep is going to be super important as well too in this process. So we're going to want to make sure we're getting plenty of sleep. From a nutrition perspective, again, I think obviously eating at your maintenance is going to be key, but specifically, is there anything we could do? I think a good diet, a good base of whole foods, single ingredient foods is going to be your friend here. So again, fruits, veggies are going to be key, making sure you get in enough protein. Carbohydrates can help with recovery as well too, but obviously we don't want to overdo the carbohydrates, especially if your activity is a little bit lower, but making sure you are getting in some carbohydrates is going to be important during this time. And perspective, again, just making sure we don't get too low. And again, you get some healthy sources of fat, fish oil, obviously from fish, things like avocado, olive oil, getting sources of fat from things like that are going to be key. But yeah, we definitely want to make sure we're at maintenance here with an injury. This is not a time for fat loss. Again, if you're in the middle of a fat loss phase or fat loss is your ultimate goal, just use this time as a diet break, right? The big thing too, I think, with not only is it going to impact your recovery if you're in a deficit, but let's say, for example, you're in a deficit or you're injured and you can't really train as much, you're going to want to make sure that if you're in a deficit during this time, that's not going to be great from a lean body mass perspective. So it's also dependent on the injury and what you can and can't do. Again, I would just say overall, put you at maintenance. But again, there's one caveat that I talked about. Again, if you're at higher body fat levels, you could potentially be in a very small calorie deficit, but I still would advise against that. And again, not only do we want to be at maintenance from the recovery aspect of it, it's probably going to speed up recovery, but also being in a deficit and not being able to lift weights isn't going to be great from a maintaining lean body mass perspective at that point. I guess the last thing I want to hit on this before I go into the next question would be somebody hears this and okay, so can I just keep eating more food and that's going to help with recovery? And there is going to be a point of diminishing returns there where if you're in a deficit, you go to maintenance, it's really, to me, that's going to put you in a better position to recover. Now, going from maintenance to a small surplus, is that going to improve recovery? I would say no. I don't think it's going to have any more benefits there. Now, again, I'm open to hearing somebody else's view on this, but from what I understand of metabolism, nutrition, like going from maintenance to a surplus, a small surplus isn't going to speed up recovery anymore, right? It's again, really the main thing is getting out of that deficit there with that. So again, if you are going to go the surplus route and maybe you think that, or you've heard that maybe getting into a surplus can help speed up recovery more. Again, I think really trying to do any amount of weight training that you can, obviously with whatever you're cleared with, is going to be important during that process, making sure you're obviously getting plenty of sleep, everything else that I talked about, but really avoiding a large calorie surplus, right? I don't think, again, there's a range on the surpluses, and I don't think continuing to go up in a surplus would be helpful either, because really what's just going to happen is, especially if your activity is lower, you're not able to lift weight and you're in this large calorie surplus, from a body count perspective, you're not going to be very happy with the outcome there with that. Yeah, took that from all angles in terms of where you could be at with that. Again, if I didn't answer this and you have follow-ups or you don't agree with what I said, then I would, shoot me a message and we can chat about this a little bit more. The next question is, anything in particular women in their 40s need to focus on from a body comp standpoint? I have three things. First, avoid long periods of time in a deficit. Think no more than 8 to 16-ish weeks at a time, or no more than 1/3 out of the year. Okay. This is for multiple reasons. One, being in a calorie deficit for too long for women, particularly over 40s, is not going to be great from a lean body mass perspective, right? This kind of demographic, we really want to maintain as much lean body mass as possible, and in most cases, build more. And being in an energy deficit for extended periods of time is not going to be putting you in a great spot there for that. However, that's just from that perspective. The big thing that we're concerned about here, particularly, is bone health as well too, right? So again, we know that women in this kind of demographic, as they age, are at an increased risk of bone loss as well too. And again, being in a calorie deficit for extended periods of time isn't going to be great from that perspective. Okay. And then obviously being in a deficit usually leads to people restricting their food. So again, they're not getting in the micronutrients that they need. They just don't feel as great as they could. And then obviously, like I said, the muscle building side and the bone health side of things, right? So we really want to make sure that with this demographic, we're not in energy deficits for extended periods of time. I see this demographic do that too often, and it ends up hurting them long term, right? They don't have the body comp they want, and they're hurting their health in the long term. Now, this isn't to say that you shouldn't ever be in a deficit. It's just that we need to be smarter with how long we're in it and everything in this with this demographic. Okay. Obviously, the larger the deficit, the shorter it should be. And again, I think no matter what, taking some time away from trying to aim for a calorie deficit, not only physically, but mentally, is going to be helpful for this demographic. Okay. Again, making sure that we're taking some time away from fat loss. And this doesn't mean that you need to take time trying to gain weight. It's just, hey, we at least want to get to maintenance, eating enough protein, giving our body the nutrients it needs for most of the time. And then periods of time throughout the year, we are fat loss dieting. Now, what I will say on this is, again, the other thing that's going to impact this is also your current body fat levels. The higher your body fat levels are, and the smaller the calorie deficit is, the longer you could be in a calorie deficit. So this is going to be very context dependent as well too. But I think generally speaking, even if you do have high amounts of body fat and you're not in a large calorie deficit, you still need to take some time away from trying to drop body weight. Like I said, not obviously the physical side of things, but the mental side of things as well, I think is an area where maybe people overlook as well too here in this demographic. But another thing on this, in terms of the people always ask like how long they should be in a fat loss phase and like how quickly they should go. In my experience, most people aren't able to sustain large amounts of weight loss over extended periods of time, right? Adherence just becomes an issue. Again, it's not great from a lean body mass perspective if you continue to lose weight at a very rapid pace for extended periods of time. The issue with that is most people aren't able to stick with it long enough to really see a ton of detriment there. So that's just a side tangent that I wanted to go over, because a lot of people are like worried about that timing of it. But again, most people aren't able to really stick to fat loss dieting for extended periods of time because it's just really hard to sustain and adhere to long term, right? So yeah, that's the first thing, right? Just avoid long periods of time in a calorie deficit, and talked about the reasons why there with that. Number two, lift weights to build muscle. We need to make sure that this demographic is lifting weights. I think it's important for everybody to lift weights, but especially this demographic. And a lot of people in this demographic also are around this kind of mindset of need to be skinnier, really continue to drop weight, be as small as possible. And this demographic, unfortunately, it's coming back around. And I think more and more people, obviously, if you listen to this, I think you understand the importance of weight training. A lot of people were brought up like, oh, hey, just be skinnier. And so it was like really cardio based, really low calorie based. And too many people in this demographic don't lift weights to build muscle, right? They're scared to do that. And they think they're going to be a massive jacked bodybuilder. And that's not the case, right? That's, if you can weight train with progressive overload to build muscle, you're going to finally get that toned body that you're looking for. Again, combining it with making sure that you aren't always in a calorie deficit as well too. Number three, Make sure you get in enough protein each day and have some of that protein around your workouts. So this is the other thing, right? We want to make sure that this demographic is also eating enough protein. I think I've seen this taken too far where it's just protein everything. Oh, I had protein, so therefore I made good nutrition choices, or it leads to people like over relying on like protein bars and protein powder. So again, there is a limit to this, but I think in general, having this demographic eat more protein is super important. Okay. So we want to make sure that's there. However, where I think it's even more beneficial. So yes, total protein intake for the day, but also making sure that we get some protein in around our workouts. So if you are working out fasted, okay, again, I generally don't, if you like doing that and that works best for your schedule and it allows you have the body comp you want and it helps you with weight management, okay, that's fine. And you feel best by doing that, then at that case, we would want to make sure we get protein in as soon as possible, right? I see too many people in this demographic in general not eat before their workout. They work out fasted and then they don't eat until, let's say they work out at 7 a.m. They don't eat before, and then they don't eat until 11 a.m. because they're fasting or whatever it may be, right? And again, I think from a body comp perspective, you are hurting yourself from a lean body mass perspective if this is the case, right? So again, ideally, we would get some food in before your workout, but if you don't, that's fine. We just want to make sure we get some in afterwards. So just making sure you get some protein in around your workout is going to be key, right? Like I said, I just see too many people not do that, and they are hurting their body comp there on that. ISSN had a position stand nutritional concerns of the female athletes, and it doesn't, you don't necessarily have to be an athlete, right? I think if you're lifting weights, changing your body composition, you're lumped into this as well. So it's not athlete and you need to play a sport or something like that. So I think a couple things that stood out to me here in this paper, the primary nutritional consideration for all athletes, in particular female athletes, should be achieving adequate energy intake to meet their energy requirements and to achieve an optimal energy availability, with a focus on the timing of meals in relation to exercise to improve training adaptations, performance, and athlete health, right? So really what that means is, again, making sure that we're not always in a energy deficit and making sure that we are eating around our workouts from time to time, right? And that's going to be super important there with that. Based upon the limited research available, we recommend that premenopausal, ureic, and oral contraceptives using female athletes should aim to consume a source of high quality protein as close to beginning and or after completion of exercise as possible to reduce exercise induced amino acid oxidative losses and initiate muscle protein remodeling and repair there with that. Close to the beginning and or after completion of exercise, peri and postmenopausal athletes should aim for a bolus of high EAA containing intact protein sources or supplements to overcome anabolic resistance. So again, just making sure that you get a good source of protein in around your workouts and close to that is going to be key there. And it does mention the importance of creatine in this demographic as well too. So again, something that I would add in there with that. So sums up what I said, and I think these are the most important from a body comp perspective for this age range. Again, lift weights, make sure you're not always fat loss dieting, take some time to be at your maintenance, make sure you get enough protein, try to get some protein in around your workouts. And from there, sleep well, manage your stress, do some cardio as well too. Again, not for the goal of losing weight, but do cardio for your overall health. And I think you're going to be in a good spot, right? These are the things that I'll work on with this demographic for all the clients I have. And yeah, it's just super beneficial there with that. So again, let me know if you have any follow-ups to this. And again, you can send me a DM on Instagram as well too. All right. So last question of the day is drop sets for muscle growth. I think this is a great question. So what I want to do is talk about what I think about drop sets and then also go into some other time-saving muscle growth techniques. So I think drop sets, they can be a good tool to implement to get more volume in overall, or if you are strapped for time. Okay. So again, this can be a great way to add in more. Real quick, let me backtrack here and go over what I think drop sets are, or go over what the definition of drop sets are. So basically a drop set would be, you could do it where you have a regular straight set, you do 3 straight sets, and then after the 3 straight sets, which again, regular rest, everything like that, after that last set, you drop the weight and you try to get as many reps as possible, right? That's one way to do drop set. Another way to do drop set is you can do as many as you want after that. Another way to do drop set is everything's a drop set. So you start with a certain weight and then you drop the weight each time, right? So let's say you're doing lateral raises, you start with 20, get as many reps as you can, drop down to 17 and a half, get as many reps as you can, drop down to 15, get as many reps as you can, right? So those are 2 ways that we can incorporate drop sets into our training. There was actually some research recently that did show, that looked at drop set training versus traditional training. And they found that drop set and traditional training appeared to have similar effects on muscular strength and hypertrophy. And this would seem to indicate that both drop set and traditional are viable options for promoting muscular adaptations. Drop set may provide a more time efficient alternative for achieving results. So again, drop sets are great, and we have research to back this up. I wouldn't have all your training be drop sets, but I think it can be a great tool again to save time and to potentially add in more volume to save time. Okay. Now I want to go over a couple other ways that you can do this as well too, right? You don't necessarily just need to do drop sets. Again, drop sets are great if you really enjoy that type of like that way of training, do it that way. But we have two other options too that I like to throw in clients programming, right? So we have myo reps and rest pause sets. Again, who you talk to, myo reps and rest pause are going to look a little bit different. But again, rest pause, myo reps are going to be somewhat of the same thing, right? So again, how you would do it would be you would, let's say, and this is how I typically do it, right? So I'm just going based on how I do it with clients and how I do it in my training. So you do, again, 3 straight sets, and then you do rest pause. So you're keeping weight the same, but instead of resting 2 to 3 minutes, you rest 15 seconds and you try to get as many reps as you can. Again, you can do as many as you want, or you could do as many reps as you can, or you could do a certain RAR as well too, right? Where you're like, hey, keep 2 reps in the tank on that. So again, that's a way to do it. So let's say I'm doing, and again, I would say your best exercises to do this are going to be machine based, cable based, and like smaller muscle groups, right? So again, that would rule out things like leg press probably isn't going to be a great option. Dumbbell chest press, barbell bench press, back squat, deadlifts, like these aren't going to be great options, but leg extension, like this is perfect. Behind the back cable lateral, this is perfect. These are all things that we could add in here with that, right? But again, that's the preface or how you would do rest pause sets. And again, this is a way to get in more training volume. What I also like to do this for is almost test the client, right? So I'll look at their numbers. Clients that send over videos, this is less helpful. But again, if a client's kind of, they don't want to send over a lot of form videos, that's fine. I understand. I test them to see where they're at with these rest, pause, myo rep sets, right? So basically what I do is it's like, all right, you're going to do your set. I want to see where it falls. If I find that, let's say, for example, on their straight sets, they're doing 15 pounds by 10 reps and they get that across the board. And then they go and do rest pause and then they get 15 reps. I'm like, oh, either your technique on this rest pause is just absolute garbage and we need to work on that, or 2, you're sandbagging your straight sets, right? And it's okay. So it can be a way to test to see, how far you can push it, right? And I use it that way. So that's another good way. But again, I think the main way to use it is you're obviously going to get extra volume in a time saving way, right? So again, this can be a great way to add sets. And I also like it to add volume like later in a training cycle to where you don't have to add in a whole straight set. And now it's like a huge time commitment. So again, this is another great time saving technique here that you can utilize. Next, we also have supersets, right? This episode will be out in a couple weeks, but I had Ryan Burke on. He headed a study on supersets and they found same muscle growth in 36% less time. They looked in antagonist supersets versus straight sets. So they had like in the superset condition, they had the lat pull down superset with Smith bench press, right? And then they would go back and forth. This was done in resistance trained individuals. It's something that can work for people that have been training for a while. And they found no differences in muscle growth, strength, or volume load. But the superset group required 36% less time to complete training sessions. So another way we can use this, they rest it for 20 seconds in between. Again, I don't think you necessarily need to go that short. You could go a little bit longer and you would be a little bit more rested and it should still save you time, right? But in this specific condition, it did save some time there with that. Again, it's probably not, you want to be careful with exercise selection on this. Doing an RDL with a back squat, again, probably not super smart, right? So again, something like a lat pull down and a Smith machine bench press, a seated leg curl with a leg extension, right? So we're working those opposite muscle groups there with that. So again, we want to make sure that, that is going to matter, right? With that. But again, another thing that we can use to save some time. And actually one I want to add in are potentially lengthen partials after failure, right? And this can be a way to add in a little bit of extra volume in a time-saving way. So they just did that recent study where they looked at people they added in lengthen partials at the end of a calf raise, right? So they just did the bottom part, they didn't come all the way up, and they found that they did have a little bit more muscle growth by doing that. So again, this could be a thing where, to save some time and get a little extra volume, yeah, you can't get a full range of motion set, but you add in some partials here, and that can be a way to get a little bit extra training volume in as well too. So again, these are all great ways to just incorporate a little bit more training volume in less time, and definitely something that I have been relying on a lot more in my programming and in clients programming, right? Adding in length and partials, adding in at the end of a set right after failure. So again, these are probably going to work best on exercises that are toughest in the short position. So think like a lat pull down. Again, it's hardest at the bottom. That's the short position. So you could get some partials at the top and get some length and work in there. Again, so exercises like that. But yeah, these are really helpful to get more volume in, and they can really push close to failure as well too with that. Again, just some things that you can add into your training besides just straight sets. Again, I think for the majority of training, it should still be your straight sets and that need to be your bread and butter. But if you want to add in some of these things and sprinkle them in, it's a great way to add in some volume in a short amount of time. I know the question was about drop sets, but I wanted to add in some other things as well too, and other options that you have there with that. That's it for this episode. If you guys have any questions on it, again, you can always reach out on Instagram. Again, if you have questions on how to program straight sets, what you do need to focus on in your 40s, and you're not sure for yourself, and or you're just struggling to see results and you need a good game plan for yourself, then my free 30-minute strategy call is for you. We dive into your goals, what you're looking to do, where you want to go, and we talk about how we can bridge that gap there with that. So if you're interested in that, the link to that is in the show notes. That's it for this episode, and I will chat with you next time.